The chamber aboard the interstellar dreadnought Celestara hummed with a quiet reverence as dozens of alien species lined its sleek, luminous walls. Creatures with silver skin, elongated skulls, and featureless eyes stood side by side with beings covered in intricate exoskeletons, their forms gleaming under the soft-eyed artificial light. Each pair of alien eyes was fixated on a raised platform at the center of the room. Above the platform, a beam of pure white energy descended, illuminating a human woman. She wore a dress that shimmered like the surface of a star, her golden hair framing a face so perfect, so symmetrical, it seemed to defy natural law. Her every movement radiated an almost otherworldly allure, and it was this very quality that had drawn the galaxy's most powerful beings to this clandestine assembly. The Hirukan ambassador, a towering figure with tentacle-like appendages emerging from his back, shifted uneasily as he observed her. "It's no wonder the Council forbade contact with humans," he said, his voice a low growl. "This one, she's dangerous." At his side, Zelvar, an insectoid diplomat with shimmering chitinous plating, clicked his mandibles in agreement. "Dangerous. She's catastrophic. Look at them." He gestured subtly toward the rows of beings. Even the most stoic among them seemed enraptured, their gazes locked on the woman like moths drawn to a flame. In the corner of the room, Captain Vrel Zaltor, commander of the reconnaissance vessel Eclipsion, clenched his fists. He had been the one to discover her. Leah, a human scientist whose genetic anomaly allowed her to perceive dimensional rifts and energy patterns invisible to most life forms. What he hadn't anticipated was her ability to pierce through the emotional and mental barriers of the most advanced galactic races. "She's not doing it on purpose," Zaltor muttered, more to himself than to anyone around him. "That's the problem," Alyrix, his second-in-command, whispered. Her translucent skin glowed faintly under the light. "If her presence alone can command this much obsession, imagine what could happen if she wanted to." Leah stood motionless, her expression serene but inquisitive. She didn't fully understand why she had been brought aboard this ship, nor the implications of the beings before her. She had been abducted from Earth days ago, her hike in the forest interrupted by a brilliant flash of light. Now she was here, in a space unlike anything she could have dreamed, surrounded by creatures that shouldn't exist. Yet, her terror had subsided, replaced by an inexplicable sense of calm. From the shadows, the High Arbiter, a being whose translucent form pulsed with veins of blue light, finally stepped forward. The room fell even quieter. "Human," it intoned, its voice resonating like an ancient hymn. "You are a breach in the fabric of galactic order. Your existence disrupts the equilibrium of millions of minds. And yet, you stand here, unaware of the destruction you could bring." Leah's eyes darted to the Arbiter, her brow furrowing. "Destruction? I don't even know where I am." A murmur rippled through the gathered beings. Her voice, a soft melodic tone, seemed to sink into their very cores. Zaltor felt his chest tighten, and he glanced at Alyrix, who looked equally affected. "You are aboard the Celestara, a vessel of the Galactic High Council," the Arbiter replied. "You were brought here because your kind has violated the first rule, to remain unseen." "I didn't break any rules," Leah protested, her voice rising slightly. "I was hiking, alone. You're the ones who brought me here." The Arbiter's glowing eyes narrowed. "Your ignorance of our laws does not absolve you. Already, your presence has destabilized those in this room. They cannot think, cannot reason without being drawn to you. Tell me, human, why does your kind wield this curse?" "I don't know," Leah said, her voice trembling. "I'm just me. I don't even know why I'm here." Zaltor stepped forward, ignoring the sharp glances from other delegates. "Perhaps we should focus less on punishment and more on understanding. If the human truly doesn't comprehend her effect, she cannot be held accountable." The Arbiter turned its ethereal gaze to Zaltor. "And yet it was you, Captain, who violated the directive and brought us to this brink. Do you not see how even now, your actions have endangered our entire coalition?" Zaltor stiffened but did not look away. "I was following protocol. I observed an anomaly on Earth, and I acted to study it. None of us could have predicted this. This, the Arbiter repeated, gesturing toward Leah with a fluid, almost reverent motion. This cannot be allowed to exist. At that moment, Leah's serene demeanor cracked. You talk about me like I'm some kind of weapon or disease. I'm just a person. I didn't ask for any of this. Her voice echoed through the chamber, and for a fleeting moment, the alien's presence seemed to falter, as though struck by an unseen force. The Arbiter recoiled slightly, its light dimming. Enough, it commanded, its voice wavering. The human must be contained before her influence spreads further. Leah backed away, her heart pounding. Contained? What does that mean? Before the Arbiter could respond, the ship trembled violently. Warning lights flared, and a sharp, mechanical voice filled the chamber. Alert! Dimensional breach detected. External forces approaching. The gathered aliens exchanged uneasy glances. Their focus momentarily breaking from Leah, Zaltor's stomach sank. He had seen this before, a phenomenon triggered by immense concentrations of energy. But the timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. Alyrix moved to his side, her voice low. Captain, the human, she might be the key to this breach. Zaltor looked at Leah, who now stood trembling, her radiant appearance somehow brighter, more intense. For a brief second, their eyes met, and he saw it, a flicker of something ancient, powerful and far beyond human comprehension. Prepare the ship's defenses, Zaltor ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. And keep her alive. Whatever's coming, it's here because of her. As the dimensional breach intensifies, a new presence emerges, one that is neither human nor alien, but something far more dangerous. Leah begins to realize her connection to the phenomenon. But will she control it? Or destroy everything in her path? The alarm reverberated through the metallic corridors of the Celestara, a deep, resonating sound that struck panic into even the most battle-hardened species aboard. Lights flickered as alien machinery scrambled to assess the situation. The room erupted into chaos, with delegates shouting in dozens of languages and frequencies, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of fear. On the central platform, Leah stumbled back, shielding her eyes from the growing radiance of the energy beam surrounding her. The light seemed alive, pulsating and shifting with an eerie rhythm, responding to her panic. Her breathing quickened as a faint hum filled the air, intensifying with every passing second. Captain Zaltor, Alyrix's voice cut through the noise, her translucent skin now glowing with a greenish hue from stress. Dimensional readings are off the charts. The breach is expanding faster than anything we've seen before. Give me a clear status report, Zaltor barked, his tentacle-like appendages moving frantically over a holographic console. It's not just a breach, Alyrix replied, her voice tight. It's a gateway. Something is coming through. All eyes turned to the large viewport at the far end of the chamber. Beyond it, the stars seemed to ripple and distort as if the fabric of space itself was being torn apart. In the center of the distortion, a swirling vortex of dark energy churned, growing larger by the second. The High Arbiter raised its glowing appendages, its voice booming above the commotion. Evacuate the human immediately. Her presence is destabilizing the dimensional barriers. No, Zaltor snapped, stepping between the Arbiter and Leah. We don't know what's on the other side of that breach. Removing her now could make things worse. The Arbiter's glowing eyes narrowed. She is the cause. Eliminate her, and the breach will collapse. Leah's voice finally broke through the argument, trembling but defiant. I'm standing right here. Stop talking about killing me like I'm not a person. She turned to Zaltor, desperation in her eyes. What's happening? What did I do? Zaltor hesitated, searching for the right words, but before he could respond, the ship shuddered violently. A fissure of energy cracked across the ceiling, sending sparks raining down. The swirling vortex outside the viewport suddenly flared, and from its center emerged a massive, shadowy figure. The being was incomprehensibly vast, its form shifting and warping as though it couldn't fully exist in this dimension. Its many eyes glowed with a pale, sickly light, each one focusing intently on the Celestara. Long, claw-like appendages extended from its body, tearing at the edges of the breach, widening it further. The room fell silent as the delegates stared, paralyzed by fear. For a moment, it seemed as though even time itself had frozen. "What is that?" Leah whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's an exolith, a predator from beyond dimensional space," Alaric said, her voice trembling. "They're drawn to anomalies, disturbances in the energy grid of the galaxy." "Drawn to me," Leah realized, her stomach sinking. The exolith's eyes locked onto the chamber, its gaze piercing through the layers of shielding and technology as if they didn't exist. It let out a low, guttural sound that vibrated through the hull of the ship, a sound that wasn't just heard, it was felt deep in the bones of everyone present. "Weapon systems online," Zaltor commanded, breaking the stunned silence. "All crew to battle stations." "Captain, we can't fight that thing," Alarix protested. "Our weaponry isn't designed for interdimensional entities." "Then we delay it," Zaltor growled. "Long enough to figure out how to stop this." The ship's defenses roared to life, beams of concentrated energy firing at the exolith. The blasts struck its shifting form, but seemed to dissolve into the void-like substance of its body, having no visible effect. The creature responded with a swipe of one of its massive claws, raking across the ship's energy shields and sending shockwaves through the chamber. Leah clutched the railing of the platform as the ship shook violently. Her eyes darted to the glowing beam surrounding her, which seemed to pulse in sync with the exolith's movements. For a fleeting moment, she felt something. An echo, a connection. It was as if the creature was reaching out to her, its intentions unclear but deeply unsettling. "You feel it too, don't you?" Zaltor's voice startled her. He had moved closer, his eyes fixed on the beam. "It's not just attacking, it's communicating." "I don't understand," Leah stammered. "What does it want from me?" Zaltor hesitated before replying, his voice low. "It sees you as an anchor, a bridge to this dimension. As long as you're here, it has a foothold." The realization hit Leah like a cold wave. "So, it's my fault." "Not your fault," Zaltor said firmly. "But you're the key. If we don't sever its connection to you, it'll tear this ship, and the galaxy, apart." The High Arbiter floated closer, its form flickering with agitation. "There's only one solution. Destroy the human." "No!" Zaltor shouted, stepping protectively in front of Leah. "There has to be another way." The Arbiter raised its glowing appendages, preparing to strike, but before it could, a surge of energy erupted from the beam surrounding Leah. The light expanded outward in a blinding flash, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When the light subsided, Leah was floating several feet above the platform, her body encased in a shimmering aura. Her eyes glowed with the same sickly light as the exolith's, and her voice, when she spoke, was layered with an otherworldly resonance. "You will not harm me," the Arbiter faltered, its light dimming. "What is this?" "She's merging with it," Alarix whispered, horrified. "The connection is deepening." Zaltor's mind raced. He had only moments to act before the situation spiraled beyond control. "Leah," he called out, his voice steady but urgent. "Listen to me. You're stronger than this thing. Whatever it's doing to you, you can fight it." Leah's glowing eyes flickered as if she were struggling to respond. "I don't know how." "Trust me," Zaltor said, his voice softening. "You're not alone." As the exolith loomed closer, its form pressing against the ship's defenses, Leah raised her hand. A wave of energy erupted from her, striking the creature directly. The blast didn't destroy it, but it pushed it back, forcing it to retreat slightly. The room fell silent once more, the tension palpable. Leah descended slowly back to the platform, her glowing aura fading. She looked at Zaltor, fear and exhaustion etched across her face. "What just happened to me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Zaltor stepped forward, his expression grim. "You're not just human anymore." As the exolith regroups, Leah's transformation raises more questions than answers. The Galactic Council faces a dire decision. Can they risk keeping her alive? Or is she the galaxy's only hope against the forces now awakened by her presence? The ship's trembling began to subside, though faint echoes of the exolith's guttural roars still reverberated through the hull. The once organized council chamber was in disarray, with delegates whispering in a dozen alien tongues, their unease evident. All eyes were now on Leah, whose shimmering aura had dimmed but not disappeared entirely. Her presence radiated something unquantifiable, and it unnerved even the strongest minds in the room. Human, the High Arbiter intoned, its flickering light faltering with uncertainty. You are no longer what you were. This transformation marks you as a danger to all sentient life. Danger? Leah's voice was sharp, trembling from the aftermath of her power surge. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for any of this. Her eyes darted between Zaltor, Alyrix, and the looming alien forms around her. You're treating me like some kind of weapon, but I'm just trying to survive. The truth, Zaltor said, stepping toward her, his voice calm but firm, is that you're both. Whatever happened back there, the Exilith sees you as an anchor to this dimension. And now, so do we. Leah looked at him, fear and anger battling for dominance in her gaze. What does that mean? Am I supposed to just let you use me? Enough, the Arbiter interrupted, its form surging with renewed light. The human's resistance is irrelevant. The breach remains active, and the longer she lives, the greater the risk to our galaxy. And yet she forced the Exilith to retreat, Zaltor countered, his voice rising. He gestured toward the viewport, where the swirling vortex had stabilized but still loomed ominously. If she can do that again, she might be the only chance we have. Alyrix, standing by Zaltor's side, glanced uneasily at him. Captain, this is beyond our expertise. If we're wrong about her, we don't have time to be afraid. Zaltor snapped, cutting her off, his eyes locked on the Arbiter. We need to understand her. She's not the enemy. Leah, overwhelmed, backed toward the edge of the platform. Understand me? I don't even understand myself. Her voice cracked, and tears welled in her eyes. I don't know what's happening to me or what that thing is out there. I'm just a person, not some savior or monster. Zaltor's expression softened as he took a careful step toward her. Leah, I know this is overwhelming, but you're alive, and that means you have a choice. You can let this fear control you, or you can fight it. The chamber fell silent. Even the other delegates, many of whom had argued for her execution moments ago, seemed to pause, captivated by the weight of Zaltor's words. A low hum interrupted the quiet, drawing everyone's attention back to the viewport. The vortex was changing. The swirling blackness began to pulse, and faint shapes moved within it. Shapes that didn't belong in this dimension. Multiple breaches forming. Alyrix reported, her voice tight with urgency. More entities are approaching. The Exilith isn't alone. The High Arbiter turned its glowing eyes back to Zaltor. You see? This is the cost of your compassion, Captain. If we allow her to live, she will bring the destruction of not just this ship, but our galaxy itself. Zaltor met the Arbiter's gaze unflinchingly. And if we kill her, the breaches don't close. That thing out there doesn't stop coming. The Council's rules won't save you from an enemy like this. The Arbiter raised one glowing appendage, its light intensifying. Then we sever the connection by force. No! Leah screamed, her body instinctively flaring with the same radiant energy that had emerged earlier. A shockwave rippled outward, forcing everyone to shield themselves. When the light faded, Leah was once again floating above the platform, her eyes glowing with that strange, alien power. Stand down! Zaltor shouted, his voice cutting through the tension. He turned to the Arbiter. If you attack her now, you'll only provoke another surge. We've already seen what she's capable of. The Arbiter hesitated, its light flickering with uncertainty. Then what do you propose, Captain? How do you contain what cannot be controlled? Zaltor took a deep breath. We don't contain her. We work with her. Leah isn't just the key to the breaches, she's the key to stopping them. The delegates erupted into chaos, voices rising in protest and fear. Alyrix leaned in closer to Zaltor, her voice low but urgent. Are you sure about this? If you're wrong, I know, Zaltor said, his voice grim. But if I'm right, she might be our only hope. Leah, still suspended in midair, looked down at him, her expression a mix of fear and reluctant trust. You really think I can stop this? I do, Zaltor said, meeting her glowing gaze. But I can't do it without you. The moment was interrupted by another violent tremor. The largest of the shapes within the vortex began to push through, its form twisting and writhing as it forced its way into their dimension. The exolith loomed behind it, its many eyes glowing with anticipation. Alarix's console flared with warning lights. Captain, we have less than 3 minutes before full dimensional collapse. If we don't act now, we act, Zaltor said, turning back to Leah. You said you didn't ask for this, and I believe you. But the truth is, you're the only one who can stop it now. Whatever's happening to you, whatever this connection is, you have to use it. Leah's glowing eyes flickered, her fear evident. What if I can't control it? What if I make it worse? Zaltor stepped closer, his voice steady. Then you try again and again, until you win. The chamber fell silent again as everyone waited for Leah's response. She glanced at the swirling vortex, the creatures clawing their way through, and then back at Zaltor. Slowly, she nodded. Okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What do I do? Zaltor turned to Alyrix. Redirect all energy to the central platform. Whatever's connecting her to the breach, we're amplifying it. That's insane, Alyrix said, but she was already moving to the console. If this fails, it won't, Zaltor said, though his voice betrayed a sliver of doubt. As the ship's energy systems redirected to the platform, Leah's body began to glow brighter, the light pulsating in sync with the vortex. Her breathing quickened as the energy coursed through her, the connection to the breach strengthening. Outside, the exolith roared, sensing the shift. The smaller entities retreated, but the exolith surged forward, determined to reach her. Leah, Zaltor said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Focus. Don't let it control you. You control it. Leah closed her eyes, her body trembling as she reached out with her newfound power. The light around her intensified, forming a radiant barrier that pushed against the exolith's advance. The creature clawed at the barrier, but for the first time, it seemed to falter. The chamber shook violently, but Leah held firm, her glowing form now almost blinding. The vortex began to shrink, the entities within it retreating as the connection was severed piece by piece. Finally, with one last surge of energy, the vortex collapsed, leaving only silence in its wake. Leah collapsed onto the platform, her aura fading as the energy dissipated. Zaltor rushed to her side, catching her before she could fall. You did it, he said, his voice full of relief. Leah looked up at him, exhaustion etched across her face. Did I stop it? For now, Zaltor said, glancing at the viewport. But this was just the beginning. Though the immediate threat is gone, the exolith's retreat was not a defeat. Leah's powers have made her a target across dimensions, and whispers of her existence spread among galactic factions who see her as either a savior or a weapon. The silence that followed the collapse of the vortex was deafening. The once chaotic chamber aboard the Celestara now lay still, the gathered delegates staring in stunned disbelief at Leah. She lay slumped on the central platform, her shimmering aura fading into a faint, pulsing glow. For the first time since the breach, the exolith was gone, and the galaxy was safe, at least for now. Zaltor knelt beside her, his large, clawed hands surprisingly gentle as he helped her sit upright. It's over, he said softly, though his voice carried a hint of uncertainty. You did it. Leah's breath came in shallow gasps, her body trembling from the exertion. I don't feel like I did. That thing, it's not gone. I can still feel it. Watching me, Alyrix approached, her translucent skin dimmed with exhaustion and stress. She's right, she said grimly, holding a data pad covered in rapidly scrolling glyphs. Dimensional readings are still unstable. The exolith might have retreated, but the breach left fractures. More entities could come through if we're not careful. The High Arbiter floated closer, its glow flickering unevenly. And what of the human? It demanded, its voice sharp and cold. Her powers are not a gift, they are a curse, a beacon for destruction. This galaxy cannot afford her existence. Zaltor rose to his full height, his presence imposing as he stepped between Leah and the Arbiter. "She just saved your council, your ship, and your lives. If it weren't for her, we'd all be dead." "And what of tomorrow, Captain?" the Arbiter countered. "The exolith retreated because it recognized her as a gateway. Others will see the same. How long before another breach appears? How long before her power destroys us all?" Leah struggled to her feet, her legs weak, but her voice steady. "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't choose to be a gateway, or whatever you think I am. But if you think killing me is the answer, you're wrong." Her gaze met the Arbiter's glowing eyes, defiance burning in her own. "I didn't survive this just to be thrown away like some broken tool." The room fell silent again. The delegates exchanged uneasy glances, their fear of Leah tempered by the undeniable truth of her words. For all her perceived danger, she was the reason they were still alive. "We need answers," Alaric said, breaking the tension. "We don't know why she's connected to the breaches or how her powers work. But if we don't figure it out, we'll be fighting this battle blind." Zaltor nodded. "Agreed. Leah stays alive, and we figure this out together." The Arbiter's glow flared, but it said nothing, its silence an unspoken concession. The other delegates murmured amongst themselves, their collective unease hanging heavy in the air. As the chamber's light stabilized, Zaltor turned to Alarix. "Prep the Eclipsion for departure. We'll need to return to the Galactic archives. There might be records of something like this happening before." "And the Council?" Alarix asked, her voice carefully neutral. Zaltor glanced at the Arbiter, then at the other delegates. "They can stay here and debate." "We don't have time." The Arbiter's voice was cold. "You take her at your own risk, Captain. If she becomes a threat, you will be held accountable." "Understood," Zaltor said curtly, already moving toward the exit. "Let's go." The Eclipsion had barely cleared the Celestara's docking bay when alarms blared across the ship's bridge. Alarix's fingers danced across the console as glyphs and warnings filled the holographic display. "Unidentified ships approaching fast," she reported. "Looks like scavenger vessels." Zaltor's tentacles tightened, his eyes narrowing. "Scavengers, this far out." "They're broadcasting an open channel," Alarix said, her voice tinged with suspicion. "Patch it through." Zaltor nodded, and the bridge filled with the crackling sound of a poorly maintained communication system. A gruff voice boomed over the speakers. "Galactic vessel Eclipsion, this is Captain Zarek of the Blood Tithe. Surrender the anomaly you carry, and we'll let you live." Leah, standing at the back of the bridge, stiffened. "They're talking about me." Zaltor's jaw tightened. "No doubt. Scavenger factions have been known to trade in rare biologicals. They've probably heard whispers about you through their black market networks." The comm channel crackled again. "You have 30 seconds to comply," Zarek said, his tone mocking. "Or we'll take her by force." Alarix turned to Zaltor. "We can't outrun them in this sector. The debris fields will slow us down." Zaltor's mind raced. Fighting was a risky prospect. The Eclipsion wasn't a warship, but surrendering Leah wasn't an option either. Not just because of the scavenger's intentions, but because of what she represented. If she fell into the wrong hands, the consequences could be catastrophic. He turned to Leah. "Do you think you can control whatever you did back on the Celestara?" Leah hesitated, her face pale. "I don't know. I don't even know how it happened." "Then it's time to find out," Zaltor said, his voice firm. "If they board us, you're our last line of defense." Leah's heart pounded as she nodded, fear and determination warring within her. "I'll try." The scavenger ships closed in, their jagged, makeshift designs bristling with weaponry. The first volley of plasma blasts rocked the Eclipsion, and Zaltor's crew scrambled to maintain control. "Shields at 60%, Alaric shouted over the din. "We can't take much more of this." Zaltor activated the ship's comm system. "All hands, prepare for boarding. Hold them off as long as you can." The scavenger ships latched onto the Eclipsion's hull, their boarding clamps digging deep into the metal. Within moments, the sound of cutting torches echoed through the ship's corridors. Leah stood in the center of the bridge, her hands trembling. She could feel the same energy that had surged through her on the Celestara, a strange, otherworldly power just beneath her skin. But tapping into it felt like staring into a bottomless void. terrifying and impossible to control. "They're inside," Alarix warned, drawing a plasma blade. "We've got minutes before they reach the bridge." Zaltor turned to Leah, his expression both reassuring and resolute. "This is it. Leah, you're not alone. Use the power before it's too late." Leah closed her eyes, focusing on the strange energy coursing through her. She felt it stir, responding to her fear and desperation. A faint glow began to emanate from her body, growing brighter with each passing second. The bridge doors burst open, and the scavengers stormed in, their weapons raised. But before they could fire, Leah's eyes snapped open, glowing with an intensity that froze them in their tracks. A wave of energy erupted from her, slamming into the invaders and sending them sprawling. As the light faded, Leah collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. The bridge was silent, the scavengers either unconscious or retreating in terror. Zaltor helped her to her feet, his voice steady. "You're stronger than you think." Leah looked at him, her face pale but determined. "And I think we just made more enemies." As whispers of Leah's power spread across the galaxy, more factions began to take notice, some seeking to destroy her, others to control her. But when a mysterious signal from deep space reveals clues about her true nature, the stakes grow higher than ever. The Eclipsion drifted silently through the expanse of deep space, the aftermath of the scavenger attack, leaving the crew bruised but alive. In the corridors, engineers scrambled to patch breaches in the hull, while others tended to wounded crew members. On the bridge, the tension was palpable as Zaltor and Alarix reviewed the ship's systems, their expressions grim. "She saved us," Alarix said, glancing toward the viewport, where scavenger wreckage floated lifelessly. "But this won't stop them. The signal will spread, they'll keep coming." Zaltor nodded, his tentacles tightening with frustration. "We've become a target, not just her, the entire crew. Every scavenger, every bounty hunter, every opportunist in the galaxy will want what she can do." At the back of the bridge, Leah sat slumped against the wall, her body still trembling from the energy she had unleashed. Her skin glowed faintly, the last traces of the power she could barely comprehend flickering like embers. Her breathing was shallow, her mind a storm of confusion and exhaustion. "I'm sorry," she muttered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to—" Zaltor turned to her, his expression softening. "Don't apologize. You saved us, Leah. You did what no one else could. But I don't even know how I did it," she replied, her voice shaking. It's not even me. It's something else, something inside me that I can't control." Before Zaltor could respond, Alarix's console began to emit a strange, rhythmic pulse. Her translucent fingers danced over the controls, her glowing skin dimming with unease. "Captain," she said, her voice laced with alarm, "we're receiving a signal. It's not scavenger comms, it's something else." Zaltor strode over to her station, his eyes narrowing as he studied the display. The signal was unlike anything he had seen before, a series of pulses and tones, each carrying a distinct energy signature that resonated with a strange familiarity. It was as if the signal was alive, reaching out to them with intent. "Origin?" he asked. "Unknown," Alarix replied. "It's coming from deep space, a region we haven't charted." Leah, still slumped on the floor, looked up, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. The tones seemed to echo in her mind, stirring something deep within her. A memory, or perhaps something older than memory. "I've heard this before," she whispered, her voice distant. Alarix turned to her, surprised. "That's impossible. This signal is from thousands of light years away. There's no way you could have—" "I have," Leah interrupted, her eyes distant. "Not with my ears. In my dreams. I've heard it before, ever since I was a child." Zaltor's eyes narrowed. "What does it mean?" I don't know," Leah admitted, her voice trembling, "but it feels like it's calling me." The crew gathered in the Eclipsion's war room, a circular chamber surrounded by holographic displays. The signal played on a loop, its strange tones filling the air as the crew tried to decipher its meaning. Zaltor paced back and forth, his frustration mounting. "This isn't a coincidence," he said, his voice firm. "First the exolith, now this. Whatever's happening to Leah, It's connected to something bigger. Alyrix gestured to the display, where the signal's energy patterns shimmered like waves. The signal contains a dimensional resonance, similar to the energy from the breach. If we follow it, we could find answers. Or walk into a trap, Zaltor countered. Leah stood at the edge of the room, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. What choice do we have? You said it yourself. I'm the key to this. If this signal is calling to me, then maybe it's trying to tell us something. Or it's bait, Alyrix said, her voice cautious. We can't ignore the possibility that this could be another entity like the Exolith, drawing you in for its own purposes. I don't care, Leah said, stepping forward. Her voice was steady now, her fear replaced by determination. If there's even a chance this can help us understand what's happening to me, I have to follow it. I can't keep running from this. Zaltor studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Set course for the signal's origin, but we proceed with caution. If this is a trap, we'll be ready. Hours later, the Eclipsion emerged from hyperspace, entering a region of space unlike anything the crew had seen before. The stars here were dim and scattered, their light barely penetrating the thick, swirling clouds of cosmic dust that shrouded the area. At the center of the region, a massive structure loomed, a twisted, alien construct of jagged spires and glowing veins of energy. Alyrix's voice was hushed as she read the ship's scans. No records of this structure in any galactic database. It's ancient. Millions of years old, at least. The signal was stronger here, its rhythmic tones pulsing through the ship like a heartbeat. Leah clutched her head as the sound resonated in her mind, growing louder with every passing second. It's inside, she said through gritted teeth. The answers are inside. Zaltor nodded. Alyrix, prepare a landing team. We're going in. The landing party approached the structure cautiously, their weapons at the ready. The air was heavy with an unexplainable pressure, and the structure's surface seemed to pulse with a faint, organic glow. As they stepped inside, the temperature dropped sharply, and the walls seemed to shift and ripple like a living organism. This place isn't just old, Alyrix whispered, her voice trembling. It's alive. At the center of the structure, they found a massive chamber filled with glowing orbs suspended in midair. The orbs pulsed in sync with the signal, their light casting strange, shifting shadows across the walls. Leah approached the largest orb, her breath catching in her throat. She could feel the energy radiating from it, the same energy that had surged through her during the breach. Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers brushing the surface. The orb flared with light, and Leah's mind was flooded with images, flashes of other dimensions, of beings like the Exolith clawing at the edges of reality. And then, a voice echoed in her mind, deep and resonant. You are the bridge, the anchor, the only one who can stop what is coming. Leah stumbled back, gasping for breath. Zaltor caught her, his eyes wide with concern. What did you see? She looked up at him, her face pale but resolute. It's not just about me. The breaches, they're part of something bigger, something coming for all of us. As the voice warns of an impending galactic collapse, Leah must confront the truth about her connection to the breaches and the devastating role she may have to play to stop what lies beyond the void. The glowing orbs in the chamber pulsed erratically, their light growing brighter as the signal intensified. Leah stood in the center, her hand trembling as the alien voice from the orb echoed in her mind. The overwhelming weight of the message had left her breathless, but its meaning was clear. She was at the center of something far greater and far darker than anything she had imagined. The anchor, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm the anchor for whatever's coming. Zaltor tightened his grip on her arm, steadying her. What does that mean? What's coming? Leah shook her head, her breathing uneven. I don't know, but it's enormous. Bigger than the Exolith, bigger than this galaxy. Alyrix, standing at the edge of the chamber with her plasma blade drawn, scanned the pulsing orbs nervously. Captain, we need to get out of here. The dimensional energy levels are spiking. This place could collapse at any moment. No, Leah said suddenly, her voice stronger than before. She stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the largest orb. We need to understand this. If we run now, we'll just be delaying the inevitable. Zaltor hesitated, his instincts as a commander warring with his trust in Leah. If we stay, we could all die. Are you sure? Leah turned to him, her eyes steady. No, but this, whatever it is, it's tied to me. If I don't face it, no one else can. The ground beneath them trembled, and cracks began to spread across the chamber's walls. The orbs flared brighter, their rhythm growing chaotic. Alyrix cursed under her breath. We don't have much time, Captain. Then we make it count, Zaltor said, nodding to Leah. Do what you need to do. Leah approached the largest orb again, the strange energy pulling her in like a tide. Her hand hovered over its surface, and this time, when she touched it, the room was flooded with blinding light. The bridge between dimensions opened before her mind's eye, a swirling void of impossible colors and forms, teeming with entities far more massive and ancient than the exolith. They were pushing, clawing, desperate to break through the cracks left by the first breach. At their center loomed something even greater, a vast, shadowy presence that consumed the light around it. The voice returned, resonating in her very being. You must choose, Leah. Seal the fractures, or let the void consume you. I don't know how, Leah screamed into the void, her voice echoing endlessly. You do. You always have. But the cost will be great. The vision shifted. She saw herself standing alone in an empty galaxy, her body glowing with unimaginable energy as the dimensional fractures closed one by one. But as each fracture healed, pieces of herself vanished. Her memories, her emotions, her humanity. By the end, nothing of her remained but the light. No, Leah whispered. There has to be another way. There is not, the voice replied, cold and unyielding. You are the anchor, and the anchor must sacrifice itself to stabilize the breach. Back in the chamber, Zaltor and Alyrix watched helplessly as Leah's body began to glow, her form radiating the same energy that had once repelled the exolith. The orbs around her pulsed in response, their rhythm aligning with her heartbeat. She's merging with it, Alyrix said, her voice hushed. She's becoming part of the construct. No, Zaltor growled, stepping forward. Leah, you don't have to do this. We'll find another way. Leah turned to him, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. There is no other way. I've seen it, Zaltor. The breaches won't stop unless I stop them. All of them. We can fight, Zaltor shouted. We can find a way to hold them back. For how long? Leah asked, her voice calm but tinged with sorrow. A year, a decade. They'll keep coming, and more people will die. You know that. Zaltor clenched his fists, his mind racing for an alternative. But he knew she was right. The breaches were spreading faster than they could contain, and without Leah's connection to close them, the galaxy was doomed. I don't want to lose you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Leah's expression softened. You won't. Not really. As long as you remember me, I'll still be here. The chamber trembled violently as the orbs began to dissolve, their energy converging into Leah's glowing form. The dimensional fractures visible in the holograms outside the structure began to shrink, one by one. Alyrix's voice broke through the tension. Captain, the entire structure is destabilizing. If we don't leave now. No, Zaltor said, his eyes fixed on Leah. Not without her. Leah stepped forward, her hand reaching out to touch his face. The warmth of her glow was almost unbearable, but Zaltor didn't flinch. Go, she said softly. Protect them. That's what you do. Leah. Go. The chamber shook again, harder this time, and Zaltor knew there was no time left. With one last look, he turned and grabbed Alyrix, pulling her toward the exit. Back on the Eclipsion, Zaltor and Alyrix barely made it to the bridge before the alien structure began to implode. The ship's engines roared to life, carrying them away as the massive construct collapsed in on itself, a cascade of light and energy engulfing it entirely. And then, silence. On the view screen, the dimensional fractures disappeared, the galaxy's fabric slowly stitching itself back together. The crew erupted into cheers, but Zaltor stood silently at the viewport, his gaze fixed on the fading light where the structure, and Leah, had once been. "She's gone," he said quietly, his voice heavy with grief. Alyrix placed a hand on his shoulder. "She saved us all, Captain. She saved everything." Zaltor nodded, his jaw tightening. "Then we make sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain. We make sure the galaxy knows her name." Months later, whispers of the human anchor spread across the galaxy. Factions that had once sought to capture or kill Leah now spoke of her with reverence, her name becoming legend. But for Zaltor, the loss remained personal. On the bridge of the Eclipsion, he sat alone, staring at the stars. The signal from the orb had long since faded. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, he thought he could still hear it, a faint, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat, reminding him that Leah's light was still out there, holding the galaxy together. And somewhere, beyond the void, Leah stood as the last barrier against the darkness, her humanity a beacon in the endless expanse.